I love Save the Cat, obviously. It is the first book that really helped me understand how story comes together, how you drive a plot through the wants and needs of the protagonist. But there's a piece missing. And when you know what that piece is, you can make sure your story doesn't sag at that point. I'm Jule Kucera, creator and founder of StoryJoules. After 2 decades of creating learning experiences for big corporations who needed to train people all over the world, I'm turning that experience and bringing it forward for writers because I am one. What Save the Cat is missing happens in Act 2. The beat sheet doesn't call it out. There's an essential element that really puts pressure, another level, another ramp up of pressure on your protagonist, and that's what's forcing that protagonist to change. It builds story momentum. I'm going to share that missing element, but first, you don't need to worry about taking notes. Everything is in the StoryJoules handbook, everything I'm saying today. And that handbook is available for free. Just click the link in the description. The easiest way to explain what's missing with Save the Cat is to put it in the context of a story. So I'm going to put it in the context of the story of how StoryJoules came to be. Once upon a time, I was writing a novel, my first novel. I'd always wanted to do it, and I was so excited to be doing this. But you know how this is going to go, right? So I write and write and write, and I'm excited, and I go visit my mom, and I said, "Mom, I want to read to you from my novel." So she sits down, we're at the table, I sit across from her, and I start reading. And as I'm reading, I can see her eyes keep dropping down to her People magazine that's in her lap. And I thought, oh no, my story is boring. And I was so sad. Yeah, that was an ouch. It hit. It hurt. And that is, for me, or in this story, the whiff, the inciting incident, the thing that gets the story ball rolling. Got it rolling for me in a big way. What happened after that is I went home and I said, do I want to keep writing? I mean, I have 63,000 words and I'm just at the beginning of Act 2. Or maybe I need to learn more about story first. So that's what I did. I learned more about story first because I said, if I just keep writing, I'm going to end up with 100,000 words that don't go anywhere. I got to go study. It is the moment where the protagonist goes, I got to go do something. So let's pause for a moment and go back to our story foundations. In the external dimension of story, we have order and chaos. And this is the point, the I gotta go, where the protagonist enters chaos. From an internal perspective, that internal dimension of stasis and change, this is necessary. We must have that protagonist enter that chaotic world because if they don't, they won't need to change. They won't be driven from stasis. Chaos provokes change. In the story of StoryJoules, what happens with me is I start studying. This is what I had done for my job. I had partnered with experts and really gotten to their heads to understand how they thought so that other people could be trained to think like them. It's what I did in school, and I treated it like I was in college. There are so many books that I read, and I'm guessing you've read many or all of these as well. It started out fun. I liked it, but then I had a sad realization. I'm a good writer, but I don't know as much as I thought I knew about how to write a full-length story, how to make a plot, drive an interesting tale that pulls the reader or the viewer from beginning through to the end. This is harder than I thought. And after I had my own whoa, shake up a belief moment, I realized this is the missing piece. It was in some story models like Story Engineering by Larry Brooks, but wasn't in Save the Cat, and I love Save the Cat. Now, the thing to realize with this shake up a belief is you can't just drop in some random event to try to drive some pressure that will cause change. It's got to connect to your story's foundation, the theme, what your character wants, what they need. It has to make sense. It doesn't have to be a bomb. It just has to feel like a bomb to your protagonist. In the internal dimension of stasis and change, what's happening is the protagonist is hanging on for dear life to stasis. They don't want to change. But this is going to be one more thing that gets them there. In the external dimension, chaos gets worse. Whether you're using a 3-act or a 4-act structure framework, this moment, this whoa shake-up, keeps the story momentum going. This is your way of proving that it's harder. and your protagonist realizes that. Back to the story of creating StoryJoules. I'm still studying, I'm reading all these books. I spend 3 days, no kidding you. I've darkened my condo and I'm watching and rewatching and taking detailed notes on Gladiator to try to understand what is driving a story. And then I had my aha, and that was, I'm not just analyzing the work of others, I will be a contributor to this field. That was my mindset-shattering midpoint. And when that moment happens, that realization or something you've learned, it changes everything. It's like doing a 180. This is the point where the protagonist moves from being reactive to proactive. Sure, they are still in chaos and things are harder than ever, but for the first time, they've hit the fulcrum. That's what Brian McDonald calls it. He wrote Invisible Ink and is the author of the 7 steps that Pixar has done such a great job communicating. He was the one who taught that to Pixar. At least that's what I've heard or read. At this fulcrum point, the protagonist moves from this to that. It's a big shift. They go from being reactive to proactive, thinking this to thinking that, doing this to doing that, having one strategy to totally changing their strategy because they now have a new way of thinking about the situation. This is the fulcrum upon which your story flips. Back to the story of StoryJoules, I become super productive. I decide that if geometry matters, if stories are fractals, which I believe they are, then every quadrant, every eighth, every energy insertion point, it all matters. Terminology matters, and I decide to make some terminology assertions. Those energy infusions that come into the story, those are going to be called joules, not because that's my name, but because Joule is a unit of energy. I learned that in high school senior physics class, and I will never forget it because my loving classmates nicknamed me Newton meter. A joule is a Newton times a meter, and I was called Newton meter for about half a year. Those piece of slices between the joules, those will be segments. And let's not call the protagonist because protagonist is a little removed. Over there, let's steal a term from video gaming and call them an avatar because that is really how the reader or the viewer experiences your story. They step into the skin of this avatar. They see what they see, they feel what they feel. And you know that when you read, we read and cry, we read and laugh. Why? We stepped into that skin. With all these realizations, I am so happy because now I've done it and I will soon be back to my novel. I just want to share this with my friends so that my writer buddies have this information. It was originally a 2-page model. An editor asked me if she could share it with clients. I said, 2 pages isn't going to help, so I turned it to 20. So I share this 20-page document with my writer buddies. I say, here, check this out. And I sit back and I await kudos. But you know how that goes, right? That is not what happened. I had my all is lost. They say it takes too long to get to the meat. They say this seems good, but I want to see a simpler version to understand that first. And they say the part that really twists. Some parts are over-explained, some parts are under-explained. And the feedback hurts. So I do what I do when feedback hurts. I go take a hot bath and I cry. And I stay there. Side note, at this point in the story, after the all is lost, water frequently plays an important role, whether it's rain or a bathtub, and that's because water is a metaphor for emotion. My realization was, I caused this problem. I rushed. I was more focused on getting it done than on what an act of service for my writer friends. Less focused on empathy, less focused on what they really needed. My position was, I got it done. I understand it from my own story. I'll just document it. Here you go. Yeah. No, that's not acceptable. I'm not creating a handbook. I decided it's not a handbook. It's a gift. It's a gift to writers. I will forget the novel for now, and I will become, this is the key, I will become the kind of person who once I've decided to do something, I diligently take on that task until I've done it right, until I've created the thing that I've desired to create. I will work through this process no matter how long it takes. And at the point I decided that, if I'd known it was going to be 3 years, I'm glad I didn't know. Going back to story foundations, in the external dimension of order and chaos, this is where chaos is at last ending And why is that? It's because the avatar is bringing order to their world. Maybe not the whole world, but their world is becoming more orderly because they have a new way of being proactive within that world. They are committed to this changed version of themselves. And this is the point where so many writers, including the one right here, go wrong. We like to end there. What we want to do is say, and then she realized blah. And then we want to skip ahead to the happy ending because we want to spare our poor avatar any more suffering. We don't want them to suffer. We love our avatars, but they must suffer. Why? Because they have to be tested. We have to see proof that they really have changed, and you don't know it just because someone says, I had a realization, I've changed. Nope, we got to see it. I wish with StoryJoules I could have skipped this next part because it was really a good test. The test must be the hardest test of the entire journey, and it was necessary because this is what really forges the new character, the new way of being of the avatar. It's like turning iron or however you make steel. It's that process where you put it through the fire and then you have something really hard and really tough, carbon to diamond, whatever you want to use. That's why it's important to the avatar, and that's why it's important to the viewer, to the reader. We want that feeling. We want to feel like, yes, I triumphed. Or if it's a cautionary tale, it's like, ooh, I don't want to do that. But what's more fun is, yes, they did it. I can do it too. This must be the biggest crisis of the entire story, and here's what happened with me. I had been working with the handbook, my gift, and I did a pilot webinar. I was asked to do another webinar for another writing group. I did, and because of the things that happened in that webinar, there was some more information needed, so I added it in and added more things. And now at this point, the document is 97 pages. And I decided it needed fresh eyes because I wasn't quite, I don't know. I thought fresh eyes would be good. So I sent it to 3 writer friends from the writing group who had not seen it yet. And I waited. Actually, I didn't await their kudos. I was kind of feeling like, The first one said, it's great, I love it, it's really useful. Second one requested a few changes to the graphics. But the third one said, can we have a 2-hour Zoom call to talk about how it could be improved? No. My first reaction was, I don't want to. Second was, that was emotion. I don't want to. Then I went to the head. Who is this guy? He's newer to the sprints. Does he know what he's talking about? Do I really care about his opinion? Sorry to say, but nope. I need to take a swan dive into the seed of possibility, be curious, open myself to whatever he has to say. He's a fresh perspective. When we talked, he was right. He gave me great feedback. I thought it maybe had become bloated. It had become bloated. Jule, you've buried the lead. That was one of the first things he said to me. And that conversation is what led to the crisis of the dig down deeper. The crisis can always be phrased as a question. Do I do X and risk Y, or do I do Z and risk W? With this example, after this conversation with the writer I'm thankful for because he really contributed to making the handbook what it is. The crisis question can almost always be phrased this way. Do I do X and risk Y, or do I do Z and risk W? For my situation, the context was I was doing a webinar for Jane Friedman in 16 days. It was my definitely biggest webinar ever, a huge opportunity, and it's 16 days away. Do I change it and risk not being done with everything that needs to be done in time for the webinar? Or do I not change it and be ready for the webinar, but risk writers, so many writers, not getting the best tool that they could possibly get from me? That's the crisis question. Fortunately, I decided to change it. I had 16 days, and just to make it even harder, because that's how dig down deeper should work, I was on vacation out of town for 7 of them. So I worked those remaining 9 days like it was finals. The webinar was a success. It's been one of Jane's 3 most popular free webinars. And I am very happy with the StoryJoules handbook, and I've gotten great feedback on it. Internally, what happened with me is I changed. I changed from being a student to being a teacher. I changed from being someone who rushes through something to doing it even when I don't want to, even when there's a lot of pressure. It's a big change. And in terms of order and chaos, the external dimensions, what changed is StoryJoules is now out into the world, and I'm making YouTube videos because if people don't know about it, how are they going to use it? How's it going to help anybody? So yes, on a lovely day, I'm indoors making a YouTube video for you, and I want you to have this. I think it's helpful. Putting all the Joules together, we have the Whiff Inciting Incident. I gotta go. Whoa, shake up a belief. Mindset-Shattering Midpoint. Wham, all is lost. Return changed and dig down deeper. Now, as far as those whiff, whoa, and wham words go, they're not meant to be cutesy, and they're not just like, They have a purpose. And the purpose I'll talk about in future videos, but the reason they are there. And the purpose is also described in the StoryJoules handbook. So click the link, download it, you'll know now. One last look at Save the Cat, because this makes the point I've been making. If we go to the back where we have the storyboard, you can see, I hope, that there are yellow squares highlighted, and there are 6 of them. And those are 6 of the Joules. Squares align with 6 of the Joules of the StoryJoules model, but there's one missing. Where is it missing? In this long fun and games section. So if you're struggling in the fun and games section, it's because it would be good to have a whoa, shake up a belief right here. An insertion of energy that will help propel your story forward. And even though I'm pointing out a lack in Save the Cat, I do want to say again, I love this book. It's a great resource for multiple reasons. When you talk about creating a gift, Jessica Brody created a true gift. It's wonderful. If you don't have it, get it. Everything I've talked about today is in the StoryJoules handbook. The handbook also has more of a comparison with Save the Cat, as well as several other models. I think it's 6 or 7. So if there's another story model that you're working with, you might want it just to see how they compare. It has a more detailed example with the movie Gladiator, the first one, not the second. That's where we're going to go in a couple weeks, to the movie Gladiator. We're going to go into that one in a deep way. But next week, we're going to talk about how StoryJoules blends the heart of the writer with the soul of the story. Thanks for being here. See you next time. Tally ho.